Hi everybody, welcome to the vlog. As you guys probably know if you've watched my videos before, I collect a lot of 60s and 70s rock and roll, but I have been recently getting into a lot of 50s rock as well, and collecting some music by the absolute pioneers of the genre from the early days of rock and roll's existence, and I've amassed sort of a respectable collection of 50s rock and LPs and some singles and even 178, so I'm going to get into it. I'll show you guys just some of the cool stuff that I've been able to find from the very earliest days of rock and roll, and I'm going to start in 1955. Not because I think 1955 is necessarily like the year rock started. You can trace it further back than that, but 1955 is where my collection starts, and it starts with this copy of Rock Around the Clock, the album by Bill Haley and his Comets. Like a lot of 50s albums, this is more of a collection of singles and B-sides. It's also a collection of basically the 3 EPs that Bill Haley and his Comets released in 1954 and 1955. This was one of the early 12-inch rock and roll LPs. Most LPs were the smaller 10-inch format until 1955. And this is very cool, although this is not an original. This is a reissue from the early 70s. On the MCA black label, and I think it's also in fake stereo. Fake stereo is not as sought after, of course, as the original mono, as you know, various processes have been made to the recordings to make them stereo, and it doesn't sound great. I usually try to look for the original mono if I can find it, but I also have some stuff in fake stereo because some of that original mono stuff is really hard to find. Also from 1955, I got some Chuck Berry. You'll notice that it's on Quality Records instead of Chess because I am Canadian, and most of these albums I'll be showing you are Canadian pressings, albums and singles rather. And in Canada, Chuck Berry's early stuff was issued on Quality. This is Maybelline. I have no way of knowing really if this is an early pressing. I suspect that it's not. Wee Wee Hours on the B-side there, and I paired it myself with this old school Quality sleeve. I really don't know the history of Quality sleeves or whether this is an early pressing or not. No clue. Let me know in the comments if you have any idea. But I saw Chuck Berry's first single, Maybelline, and I knew I had to get it. That's literally all I have for rock and roll from 55. But as we move into 1956, I have possibly my favorite record in my entire collection. This is James Brown's first single, Please, 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 and it's on 78. Yes, it's on Federal Records. It's on 78, meaning it is an early copy of it from the late 50s before they phased out. 78's. It's got Why Do You Do Me on the B-side. When I received this in the mail, it was cracked. It was actually broken right in half. I glued it together using super glue over the course of an entire day wood glue rather. Over the course of an entire day I was monitoring it, and by miracle it plays again. I will throw a link in the description to the video I made of my restoration project for that single. It was wild that I actually got that to work. Anyway, 1956 is also the year that Elvis exploded onto the scene. Of course, he did some recordings for Sun Records before that. I don't have any of those. I'm not rich enough to buy any of those. But I have a lot of his early RCA stuff, including, and I was so stoked to find this. This is an early pressing of Heartbreak Hotel. In the U.S., it would have been issued on the RCA Black label. But in Canada, it was on this blue label. This is an early pressing, of course, with I Was the One on the B-side, and another one of the absolute crown jewels of my collection. We move on to this absolutely beat-up copy of the famous Don't Be Cruel Hound Dog single. This is a reissue from the early 60s anyway that I think I got in a bulk lot of singles, not in great shape, and it's a later pressing, so not particularly rare or anything. But I have this, which I think is really cool. This is an early pressing without the original sleeve for the I think this is Elvis #1. I'll have to look that up. This was an EP that was released in 1956 with the Don't Be Cruel Hound Dog single and the I Want You, I Need You, I Love You, My Baby Left Me single as well. One of the many 4-track RCA EPs issued for Elvis Presley. This is, again, a fairly early pressing of that, so happy to have that. Speaking of Elvis EPs, I also have his Love Me Tender EP. This is an American pressing on the old school RCA Victor Black Nipper label with a totally not period correct sleeve. And yeah, I think it actually had a picture sleeve like the last one when it was originally issued, but still happy to have this. The Love Me Tender film soundtrack EP, and I also have this copy of Elvis's second studio album. Don't have his first album. I haven't been able to find a mono copy of that yet, but this is a mono of his second RCA LP. It's a Canadian pressing, and it is a reissue from, I would put this reissue at approximately 1959, 1960, somewhere in there, you know. Then I'll move on to Fats Domino. I have two of Fats Domino's albums from 1956, both from Imperial Records. I have This Is Fats Domino, and then I also have Fats Domino Rock and Rollin'. These are both issued on really flimsy little covers, and I'm not sure if that's the same as in the States or if that's just a Canadian thing. They are both on this Burgundy Imperial label, and I listen to these both a fair bit. These are in their original mono. I really don't know if they're like early pressings or not, but they're certainly from the 50s, as yeah, they were still using this flimsy label. These are the ones that were distributed by London Records. I believe there were also issues of these albums that were distributed by Quality Records in Canada, and I'm not sure if those ones would have been on these really interesting, flimsy little covers. Anyway, moving on to 1957. Sorry if this video is a little disjointed. I elected to go by sort of chronological order instead of by artist here. So, another Chuck Berry single, also on the Canadian Quality Records imprint. I have one of my favorite Chuck Berry songs, Rock and Roll Music, which I think, along with School Days, is one of the early like rock and roll anthemic songs to become popular, and it's got the great instrumental Blue Feeling on the B-side there. Like I said, I'm Canadian, so I'm happy to have this one, the debut single, I believe, or at least the first major hit by Canadian artist Paul Anka. I have Diana with Don't Gamble with Love on the B-side. I'm going to move back now into the world of Elvis, because from 1957 I have yet another Elvis EP, and it's the Jailhouse Rock EP. This is, I believe, a reissue on the Black RCA Victor label. I actually really like this EP. I particularly like the first song on side 2, which is I Want to Be Free. This EP has 5 songs on it. They have crammed 3 songs onto the B-side of this 45 RPM EP, which is crazy. And like the other ones I mentioned, I do believe this came with a picture sleeve when it was originally released that I just don't have. I also have this totally beat up 1959 copy of Elvis's Christmas album. The thing I love most about this album is that it includes the 4 tracks from Elvis's Peace in the Valley EP. I don't own the Peace in the Valley EP, and despite the fact that this album looks like it's in really bad shape, it actually plays pretty okay. So I do like listening to it, particularly the tracks from his gospel EP. And as you'll see, this is on the old school labels that were issued in Canada before they moved over to the later era Nipper labels. That's how you know, if you're in Canada, by the way, that you've got an RCA album from the 50s, because it was 1959 that they switched over from these labels to the later era labels in Canada. So this album will look different if you have an American pressing. Moving on to my... This is so cool. Another holy grail of my collection. That's right. It's the Chirping Crickets. I was so floored when I saw this in a record store. Couldn't believe I'd found it. This is an early pressing too. I believe this is one of the early pressings that was actually issued during Buddy Holly's life. It is, of course, in its original mono on Brunswick. Like everything else I've showed you and everything else I'm going to show you, unless I otherwise state these are Canadian pressings. And I'm so stoked. I can't believe I found this. The Chirping Crickets, one of the most influential albums of all time. This is a reissue, but I was happy to find this as well. This is Keep a Knockin' by Little Richard. Although it is a reissue, it is in mono with underrated Little Richard song Can't Believe You Wanna Leave on the B-side. And I also have a UK pressing of a 1957 Fats Domino EP called Here Comes Fats with its original sleeve, which I'm happy to have. In the UK, this was issued on the London American series, and yeah, on this label. It's got 3 songs he recorded in 1957, as well as a real throwback, the song Hey La Bass, which was one of his earliest recordings from way back in 1950. Moving on, 1958. My collection of stuff from 1958 starts with Chantilly Lace by the late, great, legendary Big Bopper, who, of course, tragically passed away in the same plane crash that killed Buddy Holly. The absolutely terrible song Purple People Eater Meets the Witch Doctor is the B-side. Don't look it up. I don't recommend it. It's a little iffy, but Chantilly Lace is a really fun song. Also from 1958, I have this copy of Buddy Holly's amazing song Rave On with Take Your Time on the B-side. And just check out this classic Coral Records sleeve. I mean, I'm thrilled to even just have that. And yeah, 2 great songs on there. Was excited to find that. I also have 2 copies of Elvis's Golden Records. I told you I don't like the fake stereo, and this is a fake stereo pressing from way late, like 1976 on the RCA tan labels. This was, I think, the first album I had in my Elvis collection, so it was before I studied up on what fake stereo was. I do have a mono issuing of this album from the 1978 run, when Elvis, after Elvis passed away, they put out a few of his albums on collector's gold vinyl, and I was thrilled to have it. I was like, yay, now I'll have a mono copy of this, and it's on, like, gold vinyl, and in my haste, I didn't notice that it is actually, like, warped beyond playability here, but it's a cool little piece to have in a collection anyway, especially because I have another copy of that album. Also from 1958, the debut record. I just found this. It was so awesome. I found this on the shelf, and I was like, I have to have this. This is Jerry Lee Lewis's first album. Again, this is another one that's issued on Quality Records in Canada instead of the record label that it was put on in America, which is, of course, Sun Records, the legendary Sun Records. I was hoping to see the amazing Sun Records Center Ring label when I opened this up, but it's a Canadian pressing, so it's on this interesting blue quality label. But it is from, I can't remember if this one's from 1958. I might actually have, this might be a second pressing from 1959. I forget, but still a really cool thing to have there. And now, from there, I'm going to move on to 1959, the last year I'm going to be covering in this video. And I'm going to start with 50 Million Elvis Fans Can't Be Wrong. Just an iconic front cover there, as many of Elvis's earlier albums have very iconic front covers. Again, though, it's on that fake stereo. This I found in a dollar bin, and I was like, I know it's fake stereo, but I'm going to buy it. But this is from the earlier run of fake stereo albums, when they were first doing them in 1962, so it is on the black Nipper label, but yeah, fake stereo. Speaking of fake stereo, I was a little sad when I bought this, because this is, at first glance, an absolute holy grail for me. I had never seen a copy of We Are the Imperials on a store shelf, and I was like, oh, it's only $18. That's got to be worth it. But this is actually a later pressing from the 70s on Amos Records. They've cut 2 songs off the album. This only has 10 songs instead of the original 12 that was on the first pressing, and it just plain doesn't sound very good. Even as far as fake stereo goes, this one's pretty iffy and uninspired. So, don't really recommend buying this copy if you do see it. Maybe just wait for one of the originals. Wait till you can find one of those, but I didn't really realize when I bought this. I thought I'd found this crazy steal, but not so much. But it's a fun album, and an important album in the history of rock and roll or soul music as well. Speaking of really important albums in soul music, boom! I love this album. Jackie Wilson's Lonely Teardrops, and I do believe this to be an early pressing. Gonna have to take some tape to it. The seams are splitting here, but this is great. Of course, this is also an important album in the history of Motown Records because the great Berry Gordy Jr. Wrote some songs for this album. And yes, this is an original pressing on Brunswick Records. Look at that. Oh, beautiful. My second album on this Brunswick label, the first being the Chirping Crickets album. And then, continuing on, in 1959, the last of my 50s rock LPs, I have Fats Domino Swings. This is effectively a greatest hits compilation on Imperial, but this is a really good collection of some of his biggest hits from not only his rock and roll period, from starting in 1955, but some of his earlier R&B hits, like Please Don't Leave Me and Going to the River are on this album as well. This is a reissue from the early 60s, but it is in mono, so I was happy to pick that up. And I'm going to finish off this video with a couple of singles from 1959. Buddy Holly's last single, issued during his lifetime. I just found a copy of this. It Doesn't Matter Anymore. I also love Linda Ronstadt's cover of that one, and it's got the amazing Raining in My Heart on the B-side from, of course, those orchestral sessions that Buddy Holly did towards the end of his life. Here's another seminal recording in rock history, What I Say. Stoked to have this. This is just part 1 on the A-side, part 2 on the B-side, as was common, or would become common with a lot of R&B songs throughout the 60s as well. And finally, I'm going to show you this. Only 16 by Sam Cooke. This one's in pretty rough shape, but I love the old school Rio Records sleeve. This was issued on Keen Records in America, Rio Records in Canada. Another one of those that had different distribution rights north of the border. And it's got Let's Go Steady again on the B-side. That's it for the records I wanted to show you from the 50s portion of my rock and roll collection. Stoked to show these to you. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know if you want me to keep going. I want me to go into 1960, 1961. Oh, and the albums I put in the record frames behind me are more albums by some of the classic 50s rockers, but these albums are from later on. That's Chuck Berry's Golden Hits, which was released on Mercury Records in 1967, and the Little Richard Live album, which is not live at all, but new studio recordings in stereo made during the late 70s. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. Check out the description for links to where you can find my own music, where it's sold or streamed online. I'm a singer-songwriter based out of BC. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you with another new video again real soon. Thanks for watching.